First and foremost, thank you so much for being here tonight. I know you've got a lot going on. It's been quite a bit of time that has passed, but much work is still happening. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us tonight. Much of what we're going to describe, particularly in the community progress, is entirely due to your hard work. And so I want to name that for everyone in this room. We're not taking credit for any of the great things that are happening in the community. You guys have put blood, sweat, and tears into this, but I think there are some things worth celebrating in terms of our community's recovery. Okay, so we don't have a clicker, and I've got some slides here. Okay, so today we're going to first go over, like I mentioned, community progress. I mean, I don't know that folks are as nerdy looking at every single dashboard once a week as I am. Are you? Is anyone checking the me and Michelle, exactly. So we're going to give a little bit of an overview so you can get a sense of where we are across all three jurisdictions, and then go into the fund itself, some updates generally speaking, and we'll go into specifics on each of the three programs that I think are of most interest to people in the room right now. Okay, does that sound good? Okay. Going into this one. So community progress, right? One of the things that we look at as an institution, each of the municipal, you can go to the next slides. Thank you, Hannah. Each of the municipal governments has a dashboard that shows the number of properties that were damaged or destroyed, and it kind of depends on each government how they're counting these things. So that's the dark blue. The number of permits that have been applied or issued per municipal government, and the number of certificates of occupancy that have been issued for each of the municipals. So we've got Louisville here, Superior in the middle, County on the far end, and then we went ahead and totaled them for all of them so you could see. Now, the slide here has the counts, or the number of homes, but I wanted to point out how that looks in terms of percentages. So for both Louisville and Superior, over 76% of damaged or destroyed homes have received a permit or have applied for a permit. Those are huge numbers. If you recall, when we put forward the rebuild fund back like 2 years ago now, we set a goal of 75% of homes being rebuilt. So we're definitely seeing that in Louisville and Superior, which is amazing, amazing news. For unincorporated Boulder County, that number is slightly lower at 58%. But in general and across all three jurisdictions, nearly 74% of damaged or destroyed properties have applied or received a permit. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Generally speaking, no specific time frame. We did not set up a specific time frame. Is huge. It is double the national average in half the time. We are on track for over 50% of people being back in their homes at the 2.5-year mark. That is double the national average in half the time. It's lightning speed. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, sure. After 2 years of this, I kind of figured everyone in the room knew who I was. Thank you. My name is Tatiana Hernandez. I'm the CEO of the Community Foundation Boulder County. Yeah, my apologies. Okay, any other questions on this? Yes, sir. Sure. Other people. These numbers come straight from the municipal government, so I can't speak to that. My understanding is just fire-affected properties, permits, and applications. Agnostic of who is applying for said permit. Yeah, yeah. I need to hold the mic closer and repeat the question. Thank you, thank you. So apologies for folks online. I will remember to repeat the questions and speak more into the microphone. Other questions on this? Okay, I want to reiterate, this is phenomenal. This is beyond anything we've seen across the country. The other community that is maybe closest to the speed of recovery is Sonoma County, California, and they're a little bitter that we're doing better than them. So I just want to name, like, this is something that we should take a lot of heart in and acknowledge that is not the totality of everyone's experience, okay? Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the Wildfire Fund. And I first want to mention, and I know there was a lot going on in December. Next slide, Hannah. We did put out a report overviewing the 2 years of support that we gave as a foundation, going deep into each of the different areas of support, including that kind of initial 7 million that went out the door, all of the mental health supports. There's a lot of information in that. So if you hadn't had a chance to look at that report, highly encourage that you do. It will go into a bit more kind of story than what I will today. Okay? So that's the QR code. You can pull it up. It's also on the main page of our website if you click on Wildfire Fund at the top of the page. Okay, next slide. But as a reminder, right, priorities of the fund, and I'll say, like, I don't think at any point the advisory committee said these are our priorities. They kind of emerged organically based on the needs that we were hearing in the community. So first and foremost, people wanted to come home to the best of their ability. People wanted to rebuild. Great. And I think you see that, you know, more than about half the fund was allocated for that. Really focusing on folks who are not in a financial position to absorb a shock like this, right? Folks that are really at that low income, fixed income, perhaps moderate income, for whom a disaster like this could be life-changing in the most negative of ways. I do not know, which isn't, I'm not to say that this isn't a case that I'm unaware of, but I am not personally aware of anyone who has been left homeless from this fire. And I know that sounds like a very low bar, but we shouldn't take that for granted. Often in events like this, that can happen, particularly for low-income people. And then wraparound services. So whether that was recovery navigation or mental health supports, the community resilience work, what we have found and what the data is really proving out is that it's not just about the money, right? It's about making sure that each and every person has the wherewithal to go through the long slog that everyone's been in for the last 2 years. And isolation makes that harder, right? If you're trying to do this alone, it's going to feel harder. If you have people that you can talk to, if you have folks that, whether that's for your own purposes or for rebuild questions, we're actually seeing that communities that convene more, that get together more for social reasons, are rebuilding faster than those that haven't. So that's the community resiliency piece of this that, frankly, we can't understate and is often ignored in the aftermath of disasters. Questions on this? Okay. So everybody wants to know the math. So as of the end of February, over $43.1 million has been raised. Again, that's over 82,000 donations. We've distributed over 35 million. That's about 81% of what was raised. We've allocated, and I'll speak a little bit about the difference between distributed and allocated, 41 million. So almost the whole fund has been allocated. And that includes the 3 programs we'll go into detail. The $20 million allocation for the Rebuild Fund, the $5 million for the Housing Support Program, and the $2.5 million for the Basic Needs Program. Again, that program that is meant to focus on the most financially vulnerable folks in our community. Questions there? It says in the report, and I'll reiterate here, so the fund is kept in an FDIC money market sweep account. All interest that's being earned on the fund is going straight to grant making. Okay, it goes back into the community. I just want to reiterate that. Questions on that? We're a very quiet bunch today. Okay. And so what does that look like? Here's much more detail on kind of how that 35 million that's been paid out, where that's gone. You'll see the biggest bulk of that is to rebuilding. With the next biggest bulks going to that immediate direct financial assistance, the checks that folks received at the DAC. They weren't just checks, they were also gift cards, as well as direct financial assistance, whether that's through the housing support or through the unmet needs program, folks covering rent, frankly, for some folks, covering, it was mostly housing, frankly, for the first year and a half. And you'll see a little bit about where we're at with that, as well as medical costs, transportation issues, childcare, those sorts of things. Yes, Michelle. These are checks that we have written out of the fund. Yes. Correct. Yes. So we allocated 20, but we didn't put it all out at once because we wanted to make sure like we'll pay this out as the community moves, right? Gave us the opportunity to like earn more interest on it before we do that. Okay. Other questions on this? That was a great question. Yes. Aaron, right? Alan, sorry. Mhm, 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 mhm. No. No, and I would say not yet, only because no, but the answer is no. And the point of that was, sorry, the question was, I thank you, Anna. The question was, folks who chose to purchase a home versus rebuilding their home, were funds available to assist in the purchase of that home? Um, Yep, I think the challenge is how you would describe financial need in that situation. Um, and that's where it gets complicated, right? Like some folks were able to get payouts from their insurance companies to purchase that home, and then they still have the asset of the property to sell. So it gets complicated. Yes. Well, the need would be the insurance gap. So the 20,000 was available for folks rebuilding on a fire affected property with an insurance gap. And that's a great question. Thank you for teeing me up to the next slide. Good for you. I mean, that's great. Well, who didn't? Great question. Turns out a lot of people. Turns out a lot of people didn't have an insurance gap. So looking at this, so this is the specifics on the rebuild fund. And we wanted you to see kind of month by month. These are the number of applications and the funding amounts month by month since the fund was, I guess that only goes back to September. I can't remember when the fund was established, like August? Sounds right. Through March. And again, that in that first year, we saw big numbers of applications. They started to peter down a little bit in 2023. And since December, we're seeing a trend of decline. 12.6 million has been paid or is in the process of being paid out to those households. Total of 541 properties have been approved for grants out of this fund for an average grant amount of just over 23,000. I'm not going to get into specifics. You guys can see this. You can see here the breakdown by the city. It really does align closely with those permit numbers, although I'd love to see more of those superior numbers go up. And I'll add that there are 110 applications that are still in process right now. Okay, so that would be about another 2.5 million if we take that average. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Questions on this? Yes, ma'am. Mhm. Whatever reason. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Was there a permit required to put that fence up? Okay, so this is where we'll get to the point. Sorry, asking the question. So, Constantly. The question is for folks who chose not to rebuild for whatever reason, but have financially contributed to, say, things like a fence or other elements of the stabilization of the property, might there be financial support available? I don't know the answer to that right now. There is a part in this conversation where we're going to ask for your feedback. And so that is a great example of an idea or a feedback that you can provide to our advisory committee. Yeah, and I would say, you know, if there's a permit that was needed to put that fence up and you can show that costs were incurred, it's certainly, I think, something we would be open to looking at. Yeah, we'll have a form. We'll have, yeah, we'll we'll have a form. No, this is the, you know, the point of this meeting, and I should have started with this, is both to give an update, but we're also going to ask for your thoughts because we're at a different place now than we were 2 years ago when some of these decisions were made. And other things have come up that are unique and secondary. I mean, this is where, if y'all remember 2 years ago, us saying needs evolve over time and needs will change over time and different funding will be available over time. That's kind of how it all works. You have a second mic for people to ask the question. Thank you, Severin. That is much helpful. One thing I also want to comment on this. So to Ruda and Rick's point, who wasn't underinsured, we're actually finding, I think initially everyone thought everybody's underinsured, right? 80, 90%. What we're finding is that number's probably in more like in the 70%. And there were some households who felt like, even if I'm underinsured, we have the financial wherewithal to absorb that cost and we're not going to apply for these grants. That is anecdotally what I'm hearing from some households. So the numbers of applicants to the fund versus the number of permits slightly lower for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that more people over time found that they were not as underinsured or not underinsured at all, either because they negotiated a better settlement with their insurance company or they negotiated better terms with a contractor, et cetera. Okay? Yep. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, the Unmet Needs Fund. So this, again, this fund is really geared at that kind of most vulnerable population of folks, folks who were, we didn't put a specific income limit on this, but folks who felt that they were really financially struggling to meet basic needs. What are basic needs? Housing, food, transportation, medical bills, childcare, okay? Vast majority of the supports that came out of this program were to support people, stabilizing people's housing. As you can see, 192 households have received funding through this particular program, with the average household getting at least 5 different applications of support approved. So that's about, you know, if you take that average grant amount of $2,000 times 5, that's about 10 grand of support per low-income household that was asking for help. And the average AMI, that's area median income for these households, is 62%. So to put that in context, that's about $65,000 a year for a family of 4. Okay. And we knew that this was a smaller percentage of our community, but we also knew that we needed to target funds specifically for them, given that this is just a much larger financial shock to a family that is living at that level, or a fixed income, that sort of thing. Okay. Next. Okay, and then the most recent program, we announced this, time is elusive, my friends, I think in December, November. Thank you, November 7th. The housing support program. So we were hearing from the community very clearly that there was a lot of anxiety around the sunsetting of ALE at the end of December, the additional living expense portion of your insurance coverage. And so we put a program together, did some estimates as best we could based on the information we had available, and allocated $5 million for this. So these are the first, 4 months of the program. And what we're seeing is a lower amount of participation than we anticipated. And I think it's twofold. So this program requires a couple different things. One, it does have a very I say strict, but it has a named income limit to be able to participate. So that's 150% AMI. Again, extrapolate that. That's about 150, 60K for a family of 4. It requires that folks request an extension of their additional living expense from their insurance company, which we are happy to say a lot of insurance companies are approving. Yay, right? So we assumed the answer would be no on that. We're getting a lot of extensions, huzzah. And then what we're also finding is that the COs, the houses are coming online faster than anyone could have expected. And so folks are like, well, I only really need a month, or I might need a month or 2. We can figure it out, which I'm both surprised, but also in a happy way, surprised to see. So there's, questions on this. One of the things I want to point out on here is that of those that are participating in this program, over 20% of them are renters and were renters at the time of the fire, and 79%, about 80% of them were homeowners at the time of the fire. So again, people that are looking for a little bit of help because their ALE was denied and they're just waiting that extra 4, 6, hopefully not much longer than that, 10 months to get back into their homes. Questions on, yes.
How does the 20% who are renters compare to the percentage of renters among those who lost homes? Is that a higher rate of participation than folks who own homes? Lower? Do we know?
Is that ask the question one more time?
Of the 1,000 homes that were lost,
how many of them were renters?
If 20% of them are renters, then we have about the same rate of
Correct.
participation in both.
Correct.
And that's what.
And that tracks. Yes, this tracks with the original kind of state of people's household status at the time of the fire, which again, good news, right? It's tracking pretty consistently over time. Any questions on this? Rick, you sure you don't have a question? No questions? Yes, ma'am. And if you could wait for the microphone, please, that would be great. Thank you.
So with this program, I know it's not sunsetting anytime soon. You said you put $5 million towards this.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen when there's no longer a need? Because people are.
Yeah, they'll be back in their homes.
What will happen to those dollars?
Yeah, I mean, we have flexibility to reallocate all of this, right? If we have made allocations based on the best information we had available, all of these months of experience give us more information to work with. And now we have decisions to say, okay, if there is not as much of a need as we initially thought, what else might that funding be used for? And so that's, again, when we get to the feedback portion, I'm going to encourage all of you to put in ideas on what you think is pressing, what you think would be most helpful, et cetera. Yeah. So it's not like that 5 million just disappears. Yes, Rick.
Okay, my question kind of goes to a lot of people who are really uninformed about a lot of these options, like for renters. I understand that some renters that we've talked to, or people are saying, well, I got nothing. I lost my apartment. Has there been any, or what is it that you're doing to reach out to these people? Is there anything that's being done to try to get a hold of these people and let them know, hey, this is available to you?
Yeah, great question, Rick. So I'll start with, so do you want me to answer that specifically as to renters? Everybody. Okay, so we have great partners in the community. Every single municipal government has called every single owner of record of a fire-affected property and reminded them what they are eligible for and what their tenants were eligible for. So that's one form of contact and one outreach that was done, again, at almost every single municipal level. We really lean on the folks that are on the ground, whether that's Superior Rising, Marshall Together, the town of Superior, others that have direct relationship or closer relationship to folks to help us get the word out. We do press releases. We're, trying to use the media as much as we can to get people informed. Might there be folks out there who have yet to find that? Tell them. And we will point you towards the some of this has to be word of mouth to an extent because of the nature of community work. And all of this is still available to them, right? Someone can come in today and say, holy moly, I've had unmet needs for, the last 6 months, and we'll see what we can do to work with that household. Yeah. Does that help? Yes, ma'am.
About reallocating funds.
Mhm.
Many are going back to their homes, which is excellent. And there's a whole category of us that are delayed
Mhm.
by reasons beyond our control.
I hear you.
And while I did start a lot of the grant programs, now that it has come to a halt
Mm.
because of delays beyond my control.
Mhm.
And I will be applying for many of this and possibly eligible, but it's going to come later.
Yes.
So I'd appreciate if you and your team can reach out or email,
Yeah.
make sure that none of us really don't need those funds
Mhm.
before it's reallocated.
I totally
So,
agree with you.
At
So-
the start of this meeting, I briefly mentioned to you there's a delay,
Mhm.
and as you said, it's pretty serious. So
Mhm. Mhm.
it's beyond my control. So I'm interested in many of these, but
Yeah.
I'd appreciate if you could contact us before the funds are depleted.
Yeah, I could not, thank you for that question, and I could not agree with you more. Candidly, people started asking when we were going to start reallocating these 6 months ago. I was like, that's not fair. It's going to take some folks longer. And we are sensitive to that. And just because folks were able to get into the process sooner, that doesn't mean we're going to disadvantage people for whom it has taken longer. So we are interested in hearing feedback, but timeline is unclear. And I would encourage you that if you have delays, get the application in now, start the process so that we're aware of your intent, even if we need to consider a longer timeline for that individual household. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Okay, other questions on this? And please, this is your time to feel informed, to ask the questions. Okay, all right, we'll move to the next slide. All right. So now we get to this question. I think it's been top of everyone's mind, right? I put out an ask to some kind of key folks who have their ear to the ground of like, what are some frequently, like, what do you think is people are worried about, right? Number one was this question of reallocation. What might you reallocate? When might you reallocate? Are there deadlines to any of these? And I can tell you today, there is nothing on the table right now to close these grant opportunities anytime in the near future, but that we are looking at longer term, what might their additional needs be, okay? Should there be any changes, whether that is in terms of a deadline, et cetera, we would provide extensive notice for folks just to make sure. And again, do that second round of outreach with our municipal partners to say, hey guys, now there's a deadline. Let us know if you need more time than that. I'll give a great example, right? On the rebuild fund, I mentioned we're like, what, 540-ish properties approved? Sounds right. 110 are in process. I know we're going to get at least another 30 more when Wildfire Condos comes back online in the summer, right? Those folks haven't even gone into the application process because they're still rebuilding the collective structure. Folks haven't even gotten to their personal condo units yet. So I know I've got that in the back of my head, right? 30 units times 20,000, that's a not insignificant chunk of change. But moving forward, I mentioned we want to hear from you, right? We know that other things have come up, things that might not be eligible through any of these programs, things that you might be experiencing now that you're getting back into your homes. I mean, I imagine, I'm not going to assume, but I imagine that coming back to a house doesn't necessarily feel like you're coming back to the home. And so we're interested in hearing, like, what are some ways that we can support even through that transition? And it can look like a lot of things, right? We've had mental health supports available for 3 years. We're probably one of the only communities that's been disaster affected to have the kind of mental health supports that we've seen. Is that something the community wants us to continue? Is it not? Are we looking more at landscaping? I will tell you personally, I have a lot of angst might be the right word around insurance and insurability. now that our community has gone through an event like this. It's why we engaged United policyholders really early on and have continued support for United policyholders. So you'd have that as a resource. Is that something you want us to continue to ensure is available? Because I am hearing from people in the community that their rates are doubling or they're not getting covered at all, right? These are things we're really concerned about. So this QR code will take you to a form. It is anonymous, I believe. It is anonymous. Feel free in the comments if you want to tell us who you are. You don't have to stay anonymous, but we did want to give you that option. And it'll ask you to categorize kind of within a couple of different buckets. You know, what is this about? And obviously there's an other bucket. And then take your time. We'll have this open for at least a couple of weeks, if not at least to the end of the month. And all of this will be brought back to our advisory committee for their consideration, right? All of this will move a little bit slower now so that we are conscientious about the examples that we just heard, folks for whom this is taking longer out of no fault of their own, or, you know, while we're seeing 3-month declines, that maybe we'll see an uptick between now and July, right? We really want to see those trends be consistent over time before we make any radical changes to things. Okay? Fair? Yes, Michelle.
How widely would you like this distribution feedback form
I yeah.
spread?
Yeah.
Because we can put it out. Kiana's on the phone, I know, and
Hi,
I'm sure
Kiana.
Louisville can. And
Ideally, we'd like this to be fire survivors only. And again, because you are the most affected by this, I think there's a lot of opinion broadly in the community, but this fund is meant to support all of you and the community's recovery. So I would say if we could keep it to fire survivors, that would be great. Thanks. Yes, sir. Yep. Yep. 3. 9. 11. 9. 9. So a third of the community is fire survivors. And there's a reason for that. So it is important. And so there's 9, many of whom are from Louisville, Superior, and unincorporated Boulder County, some who have disaster recovery experience from other disasters that happened in our community. But when it came to having fire survivors specifically on the committee, it's considered a little bit of a conflict of interest if someone's a decision maker who can then also benefit from the fund. Does that make sense? And so, well, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry that that's been your experience. I will offer that smoke and ash affected homes have been eligible for a rebuild grant for almost over a year now. I'm trying to remember when I think that decision was made in January of last year. And so if a smoke and ash affected home, and this is all in the rebuild guidelines, which we'll show you where they are. We heard that loud and clear from the community back in, gosh, the end of 2022 and made that change, if not December of 22, early 23. I'm losing track of what year we're in right now. So we heard that loud and clear from the community and made those changes. Now, if that information hasn't gotten out broadly to the community, certainly we will take note of that and make sure that that information's more broadly available. But if a home has been catastrophically affected by smoke and ash, they are eligible for the rebuild fund. I think one of the hardest parts about this, folks, has been the amount of disinformation and rumor that has spread, whether it's online or person to person. I'll tell you, the Unmet Needs Fund, for at least 6 months to a year, all I heard was, what about renters? And I'm like, they're totally eligible right here. They're fully eligible. But that message kind of got locked into people's minds. And it's really hard to combat that. Smoke and ash homes, same deal, right? We heard it loud and clear. It was intimate to us as at the institution. We made those changes as soon as it was clear to us how extensive that was for people. And we even had folks receive mitigation if it wasn't a catastrophic smoke and ash, but maybe their insurance company, I'm not going to use the word I want to use, did not support them to the extent to which they needed support. We even did that out of the Unmet Needs Fund. If folks had a financial gap and that was disastrous or would have been considered a real financial hardship, we've made grants out of the Unmet Needs Fund to help people cover their mitigation costs. And again, like, we don't publicize every single individual story out of respect for your privacy, first and foremost. But if you can help us share that we take every specific, unique situation into consideration and try to get a sense of like, how deep of an issue is this for the community? And does it then require us to expand some of the guidelines of the program? I think we've been responsive to that as those have come up. It is, well, the organization is a Loveland-based organization. They are a housing, community development, financial institution, which means they have the expertise on building of homes and distributing funds. It's always been, they were a contractor of that group who was doing the intake. Yeah, they were basically the front line, but the distribution was still coming out of Impact Development Fund. Okay. Yes, Rick.
Okay, since you mentioned unmet needs more than once, I kind of have maybe a twofold questions. The unmet needs also includes like furniture, appliances.
It does.
That's
Yeah,
part of it. Okay.
it does.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the way the unmet needs are being basically distributed. We're being told that we'll give you money from that unmet needs. So you want to buy a refrigerator or you need a refrigerator.
Yep.
But if you already bought the refrigerator, we're not going to give you money. You have to not buy
we have
it.
to pay the vendor.
To pay the vendor.
Yep.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the logic behind that.
Sure. So institutionally, that's a fair question, right? Like, we have a responsibility to make sure that the funds are being used for the purpose in which they say they're being used, right? Which in most cases means we're paying the vendor first, right? Where it gets tricky, and again, we're kind of having these conversations right now around reimbursements for certain things. People are moving faster than maybe they're applying for things. The challenge comes into, okay, you bought your fridge, so respectfully, you had the money to buy the fridge, and now you want reimbursement for it. We're not guaranteed that those funds might fund something else that is not considered an unmet need. Does that make sense? I know. Yeah.
Say I spend that $100, I bought the fridge for $1,000 and you give $100 in unmet needs. It kind of doesn't make sense saying, well, we're not going to give you the money because you're going to use it for something else. It's like, well, I already have to distribute that money for my funds. So whether it just, for some reason, this is totally, just does not make sense that you're saying, well, you already spent it, so we're not going to give it to you to pay for what you already were paying, what you're trying to pay for to kind of compensate for that.
I think Alan has an answer to that question.
Was it that obvious?
Yeah,
from
no,
what
I
you're
appreciate
saying?
it from you reaching for the microphone. Yes, please.
I think there's an issue with the fungibility of cash.
Yeah.
And so I don't have the money for the refrigerator, but I have money for something else and I need the refrigerator now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move money out of X bucket. It may be landscaping. It may be, refrigerator would fall into contents.
Yep.
It could be structure that I haven't spent yet.
Yep.
I pay for the refrigerator, or I put it on my credit card
Mm-hmm.
and I can't pay my credit card bill.
We can. If you put it on your credit card, that's considered a vendor and we
So-
can pay that back.
Right. So if the form said, if you need to do this, go
Yes.
buy it.
Yeah.
You bring us the credit card bill and we will
Yes.
take care of paying it. It just
Yeah,
puts
I'm
the
Looking at
foundation
Gwen,
of
where
the position
am I saying
of
things
having
correctly?
to pay that quickly
Yeah.
enough to avoid the finance charges.
Yes, yes. I mean, and that's the risk, right? So I thank you for saying that, Alan. I'm going to repeat this again. If you put it on a credit card, we are paying down debt that people have put on credit cards for things that are eligible for unmet needs, and that's fine. Honey, then you've got a credit on your credit card and you can use it for something else. It is just I know it's crazy. I know it seems weird. And please know, like, these are, they are IRS rules that we are navigating and doing our best to be as flexible given the circumstances that people are in. So with every example, we have another moment where we're being flexible. Yes, sir.
But that's one of the issues that when we're rebuilding a house,
Yep.
it's not just one group we're dealing with.
I know.
We're dealing with
A lot.
20 groups.
Yeah.
And every single group has another hoop to jump through.
Yeah.
Your hoop is put it on the credit card.
Yeah.
But you don't know that you're supposed to put it on the credit card.
Mm-hmm.
People in smoke and ash problems,
Mm-hmm. They paid out of pocket. Yeah.
they had to
Yeah.
live in their house.
Yeah.
They paid out of pocket.
Yeah.
Then they were told by Community Foundation, no, we can't give you money because, and I know that that's changed.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first part of the first year, basically, it was, no, we can't reimburse you because you've already paid that contractor. We only
Yeah.
can pay the contractor.
Sure.
So when
Um,
you're jumping through
mhm.
30 hoops,
Mhm.
not just one hoop,
Mhm.
30 hoops, it's
Mhm.
pretty hard to keep it straight. And,
One
that-
of-
and that's where I would think your group or any of the groups
Mhm.
should try to make things easier for people. And honestly, it hasn't been easy for not only your group, but for a lot of the groups.
Yeah.
Everything takes 10 phone calls and
Yeah.
about 12 pieces of paper.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm just looking at our friends. When did we start reimbursing for smoke and ash stuff? Okay. 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 So thank you for that. So we heard that from the community and made that change in September, understanding that people were putting things out of pocket and it wasn't healthy for them to live in those homes. It takes time for information like that to get to us to the scale to which that it, again, leads to kind of guideline changes.
Maybe if you had 6 people on the committee instead of 9.
Well, here's,
Just a
listen,
thought.
I mean, listen, okay. And what we were hearing from community very loudly was that 90% of homes were underinsured. We're finding that's closer to 30. Sorry, we're
70.
that 70, thank you. Right. So anecdotes are not always data, right? And it is one of the toughest parts about disaster recovery. And I've said this before, I'm going to say it again for folks who maybe haven't heard this. I grew up in South Florida. I've been through more than my fair share of hurricanes. I lived in LA. I've been through earthquakes. I've been through some bad hurricanes in Miami. It is a disaster is exactly that. It is a disaster. FEMA is complicated. SBA is complicated. All of the things are complicated. We are probably the least complicated and the most proximate to community and have the ability to, in closer real time, make the changes. And I will tell you that as we've made changes, your municipal governments have made changes. It's influenced their thinking. It is changing FEMA at the national level. FEMA is now talking about making sure that all of their disaster recovery applications go through one portal. We innovated that here. And so I hear you. The system is not easy after a disaster, and it's not fair. It's the worst possible time to make things hard for people. And everything that we've done in this community is literally affecting things at the federal level. It's not perfect. And there's much that we've learned, but as far as I can tell, and I get calls from communities around the country regularly, they're looking at everything that we've done here and saying, how do we do it the way you did it? Because if I tell you the best practice, the current standard of disaster recovery support from a charitable perspective is not cash. is not giving you money to rebuild your house. It's not giving you money to pay for your housing while you wait. It's providing services. Here's a blanket, right? Here's some water. It is truly services. And we took a very different approach. We're seeing very different outcomes. We're not taking full credit from that. I think we have a unique community that has an incredible amount of community resilience built in. But everything that this community has done has brought the attention of at the federal level and in every single one of the systems that does this work. So do I agree with you that, or do I disagree with you that it hasn't been perfect? No, I agree with you. It's not perfect. And we learn with every single event like this. Let's be clear. This was the most disastrous event in Colorado state history. There was no precedent for this in our state's history. The closest we could get was California. And when I looked at their outcomes, I said, that stinks. We can't do it the way they've been doing it. And we did things differently. And yes, it's been a learning process. So I agree with you. And I hope you see that we do listen and we make adjustments as needed. And now we want to hear more from you, right? Now we want to hear more from you because this is all of us who are making these changes. We have an incredibly civically engaged community. You guys are the experts. You're living through this. I hear the challenges that you have with your escrow banks and all of these other things. All of this is informing policy at the state level, and at the federal level, they're looking at Colorado to say, hey, these guys are really changing the game here. That's not maybe reassuring or a balm for all of us, for all of you who've gone through this, but it does mean that the next time something like this happens, people will be in a better position.
I just
Yes,
want to
sir.
make one comment. You've mentioned several times that the actual number of people who were adequately insured was reduced. I don't believe that. The actuaries, the people we get together, we know what's going on. It's 93%.
Of the people that get together with you.
93%
Yeah.
were-
Of the
were
people who gather
underinsured.
with you.
And that comes back and the reason is that they thought they were insured when they started. But now they're having to take a job
Mhm.
because they're not.
Mhm.
So I don't know where you're getting your actuaries from, but that's totally wrong. So don't repeat that, please, until you can prove it.
I'm more than happy to ask the Division of Insurance if you'd like actual numbers. But I think what we're experiencing is that folks who are maybe adequately insured or, and there was an or in there, or feel that they are in a financial position to absorb the shock are not showing up to the meetings. Or they're financially well off. I mean, we had folks who donated to the fund who were themselves fire survivors. Yeah. Mhm. 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 I think the second piece of what I was saying, and I hear you. The second piece of that comment was, and folks felt like they could absorb the shock. So they're not. Yes, but they felt that they could absorb the shock. That's the difference. Yeah. 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 Please, Alan. Yeah.
Part of the problem is the definition of underinsurance.
Agreed.
So if I choose to self-fund because my insurance was sufficient to allow me to do that,
Correct.
then I define myself as not being underinsured. And with all respect to the neighborhood you're talking to one neighborhood. And so we have to you can only base this on a broader sample set. And DOIs gather that information. I've responded to those surveys. There have been times where I thought, I don't know that I'm answering the question they're asking, but I don't know that I'm actually giving them the data that they
need.
really want.
Yeah.
Right after the fire. I mean, I listened to a meeting for the city of Louisville where people were saying, I'm underinsured. It's going to cost me $1 billion to rebuild because contractors are telling me it's $500 a square foot. It's
Mhm.
not what it's turned out to be.
Correct.
And at the same time, and there was this conversation about, so we can't afford to upgrade to the 2021 code. Totally reasonable. But if I'm $350,000 underinsured,
Mhm.
$50,000 to close the code gap is not going to mean that I can rebuild. So I think a lot of people have found that they had the money, which explains how 75% of people are on their way.
Mhm.
I would shift the conversation to 30. We expected 90% of people to apply for assistance.
Correct.
And as it turns out, only 70% of people have.
Yes.
And we don't know why.
Yeah.
Some of them may have been adequately insured,
Yep.
which may mean, which,
That's fair.
right,
That's fair.
right.
I'm giving you the anecdotes that I hear from folks who I
Right.
know have not applied to the program, who I have asked, why did you not apply to the program? You were underinsured? Yes, I was underinsured, and I felt I could absorb the amount of the underinsurance. I wanted this to go to folks who were really struggling.
Which could mean I built back a smaller house that I
Correct.
could afford.
Correct.
And that was fine because
Correct.
all of our houses are too big, or many of our houses are too big. Or whatever, or I took a job, or whatever combination.
Or
of
whatever it
things.
was. Yeah. I took a HELOC, whatever it was. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I
Go ahead,
just
Rick.
wanted to make one additional statement on that. It's the fact that we do know that there were a number of people underinsured, whether they absorbed the cost or not.
Mhm.
I think what needs to happen probably is someone needs to go out there and educate people to go out there and say, hey,
Yep.
you told me, that, Allstate, you told me my going to
Mhm.
cost 500, it's going to cost me 900.
Yep.
I think people need to go out there and be educated so that this
Doesn't happen
scenario
again.
doesn't happen again.
Couldn't agree more with you, Rick. Out of curiosity, show of hands, who has attended at least one United Policyholders session? Great. Have you found those helpful? Okay, super. I mean, great examples, right? So we think of that as like the best money spent out of this fund. And my hope is, again, like they added programs, they changed their programming based on the needs of this community and to add things like legal assistance, case by case legal assistance. And now the third year grant to United Policyholders is looking specifically at those households that are struggling to be insured, either because their original insurer dropped them or their rates are doubling or et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's one area that I'm particularly nervous about, given the sensitivity of where I'm from and what has happened in Florida many decades ago, what we see in California in terms of insurance, people backing out entirely or reducing the coverage in order for it to be financially palatable to people. So I would encourage you, like, even if you have rebuilt your home and you feel like you are done with insurance, you never want to think about it again because that has been brain damage and taken years off of your life. Please continue to engage in the United Policyholder webinars because they are now talking and switching to proactively what happens a year from now when your new house gets dropped or you're struggling to get the insurance. And that's going to affect not just all of you, but the entire community. That is everybody, because those decisions don't get made at the house level, they get made at the community level. So when we're talking about mitigation, there's home mitigation, but it's not going to change the policy numbers unless there's neighborhood mitigation. And that's a whole world that I'm only now kind of slowly dipping my foot into and trying to figure out how much we want to get involved in that. But it's a big concern for me. Again, this is all feedback. Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
So United Policyholder has been absolutely wonderful. Probably the best resource that I've ever used for this disaster. Just to not to put more on to the comment about the percentage, I was one of those, or my husband and I were one of those households that thought we were fully insured. To this date, now 2 years later, each month we just find out that we are more underinsured. So I see why people are a little touchy about that, because that is really a difficult thing. It is not a point in time. It changes constantly. And it's still changing.
That's fair.
So just wanted to share that. Then also, two comments. The ALE, are you going to consider increasing those payment amounts per month? That is one thing, and I'm assuming you want to hear what we're hearing. I'm in my house.
Mhm.
It's not for me, but I have many neighbors who I hear are still renting and they're paying out of pocket because there is not enough money
I hear you.
through that. So just wanted to share that. Then another comment is, as far as communication, communication is key. We
Mhm.
all know that. Do you have access to all of our information? Can you do a newsletter just for this group?
Oh.
It would be excellent. I would read everything you send me.
Okay.
It is very difficult to find information out.
Yeah.
I've gone out to the website. I found your name finally. I made a couple of phone calls,
Mhm.
couldn't get through to anybody.
Okay.
We have a lot of other groups that are really good at communicating, our small groups.
Yeah.
But just another thought is, if you as a group could communicate out often,
Yeah.
any update, I know all of us would appreciate that.
Well, thank you for that piece feedback. Thank you for that, and I hear you loud and clear. I would encourage you to put in that suggestion for the housing support program, right? Whether it's to up the amount. Another comment we've heard was to extend it beyond the current AMI limits, like maybe to folks up to as high as 200% AMI. So that would be households of about 200,000 income for a family of 4. That's been an idea that's been floated. So please do put that in. Let's go back to, forgive me, I'm going to take us back to the DAC days. If you recall, if you did come to the DAC and applied for that immediate financial assistance, which over 90% of affected households did do, we took in information. What we forgot to do was ask you to check a box saying it was okay to contact you, which has made it hard for us to use the information that we have. But we actually have cell phone numbers for almost every single group. And so if we're hearing that folks are okay with us sending like a mass text, and that's kind of the challenge, is we have cell phone numbers, but not necessarily emails for most households. We can start there and maybe use text as a way to direct you to websites, things like that. If that's a thing, but we need everybody to opt in. And frankly, we forgot to ask. Well, yes, sir. And that's because your data has been sold. Congratulations. Me too.
I, I just,
Both parties, to be fair. Okay. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. We will certainly look into that. I mean, again, we erred on the side of, we didn't think, given all the different actors that you were having to navigate and listen to and deal with, we didn't want to pile on to that. But if we're hearing from the community that you want that direct communication, that it's not just through the Marshall Togethers, the Superior Risings, the media, et cetera, happy to do that. I've been itching to send you text, but please recommend that.
I was just going to ask a
Yeah.
question on the text. Does the application you use for sending text allow people to opt out by,
Yes.
saying
Yes.
stop? And
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you for your patience while we pull the mic over.
Changing direction a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Going back about 4 or 5 slides, you had
Let's
a
go.
chart,
Let's go. 4 or 5 slides.
and you had a chart that showed the number of applications for the fund.
Yes.
paid
Rebuild
per
fund
month.
specifically.
There you go.
That one. Go ahead.
Okay. So doing the math on that,
Mhm.
it looks like if you have 110 applications outstanding,
About $2.6 million at
You
the
know,
average
so-
grant amount. Uh-huh.
that still haven't been awarded,
Mhm.
it looks like folks who submitted in November
Mhm.
still haven't gotten word by April 1st. You do the math on that. They still haven't got, so about a 5-month lag. So when we apply to when we hear about it. So
Sure.
in my case, I did not apply for the fund because I was overwhelmed with
Understood.
in in transient insurance company,
Understood.
all I could do.
Yeah.
So on January something,
Mhm.
don't even remember the date.
Yeah.
With the help of a navigator,
Mm-hmm.
I submitted.
Great.
So then doing the math, another step forward, it seems like I might not get any help on that until June.
Not necessarily.
But so it seems like there's a 5-month gap. And
There's not necessarily. I will offer this. So
Mhm.
between November and December, Impact Development Fund, who is a name I hope is familiar to you all,
Mhm.
had a group of intake specialists, CEDP, that they began to wind down. And I'm just gonna be very transparent with you. In that process, they then sent over a ton of applications that were not completed and that the team at CEDP is now trying to get completed, but that we had no knowledge of. So it was part of a challenge with the transfer of like, okay, CEDP is going to wind down. We're seeing these declines. And then a flood came in. So I don't know off the top of my head what the turnaround time is for an application process for the rebuild fund. I can certainly work to get that information to you. But my understanding and based on how I see them come in, because they do send me every single completed one, it's not 5 months, I don't think. And I'm looking at friends. Is that how long it took you? Okay.
so what I'm suggesting is
Okay.
that one,
Thank you for sharing that. I
one
was not aware.
process of improvement
Yeah,
of-
turnaround. Yeah.
issue would be to address the turnaround.
Okay.
Because I'm worried about many of our friends who were delayed.
Fair. Yeah.
And to even get more delay
Yep.
on some of that critical funding
Okay.
for them.
Yeah.
Speaking more for them than for me, I'm already in the hopper. All I can deal with is what I can deal with. We're still getting furniture in our house. We haven't got it all. So,
No, I appreciate you raising that. I was not aware that that was the standard time, but I'm hearing that from a couple of people, so we'll look into that. Yes.
I had to convince the young lady that I was working with that the forms that I sent her were the correct forms.
Okay.
And then I get through that whole process. And then I finally reach out to her and say, I haven't heard anything about my application. Oh, well, we've changed the way we're doing it. So now you're going to have to resubmit everything you've already submitted to the
This
new form,
Okay.
which I did.
Okay.
And it's been at least 5 months.
5 months.
Yes, and I keep following up with the dude saying, hey,
Where are we at?
we are,
Yeah.
so my husband and I, in sheer frustration,
Mhm.
went and took out a mortgage because we can't wait to see what we're eligible for.
Sure.
And I told them this.
Yeah.
He sent me an email 2 days later and said something about, well, I know you're starting your building process. I'm like, I told you, we're like more than halfway through our house.
Yeah.
So,
I'm really sorry. I'm really
Yeah.
sorry that
Yeah.
that's been your experience.
so
Truly.
I'm not sure, like,
Yeah.
who do I escalate this to?
You just did.
I,
You just did. You just did. And I appreciate you guys sharing that candidly. I will look into it and get some answers. Okay.
Yeah.
And have a better understanding of what we can do to prioritize those that have been in the process longer.
So I'm not,
Yeah.
what I'm gonna need to figure out
Uh-huh.
is, what do I do since we're securing a mortgage?
We can pay back the mortgage. Yeah. Yeah. Again, that's a third party vendor. Yeah. But to be fair, like that's interest that you're taking on that. And so we'll look into that. Yes. Hi.
Easy question.
Bless you.
Will these slides be available?
Yes. So we're recording this, I believe. Slides will be available. And again, we try to keep these close to fire survivors because we do want to have this kind of candid conversation. We want to hear your experiences. I'm personally not applying for these things, so I don't know how challenging it is for each of you, and I appreciate the candor. We'll look into it. We'll do everything we can to make that process a bit easier, and we'll share these publicly. So that was the whole point. We keep the meetings to fire survivors, and then we make this public for the whole community. Yeah, on our website, you bet. Yes, Rick. Sure.
I hope it's the last question.
Well, I don't know, Rick, maybe, now that you said it.
Going through and filling out our taxes.
Yes, sir.
Now that we're moving into our house.
Yes,
We need to go and
great question.
do the big tax
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Has there been anyone or any place that we can get information on how to proceed in filling out like our federal income taxes to
Great
include all this stuff?
question. What a great question, Rick. United Policyholders has run some webinars, Alan sharing with me about taxes, but I hear what you're saying, which is maybe a more case by case basis. That is a great suggestion to throw in there with respect to whether it's a tax accountant fee that you need to take to do this right and not get additionally hurt in the process. Again, I'm picking my words carefully here. I want to use other words. So I would recommend, like, if that's something that you guys want us to think about, whether it's legal fees for an attorney or a tax attorney, whatever it might be, that's a great idea to throw in there.
And
Oh,
for Rick, not only has UP addressed that with numerous seminars all along the way, but on the Slack,
mhm.
there have been a number of discussions there's a whole channel called Tax, and there've been a number of discussions. The problem with UP is a lot of their attorneys are out of state,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
their tax people are out of state, and
Yeah.
Colorado's unique. So
Mhm.
what you'll see on the Slack messaging is a couple people who are tax accountants who are actually ex-fire victims as well.
Mhm.
Not in this particular fire, but who
But
know
other
their stuff.
fires,
And
yeah.
you can follow up there and get great support from the Slack channel on taxes.
And I think just again to offer the kind of organizing that we do behind the scenes, if this is something that folks are hearing is like the next level of brain damage that you're going to have to go through, we can call the Colorado Bar Association and say, we need you to give us your 12 best disaster tax attorneys, and we'll help people foot the bill, or we'll something for our committee to consider. But we need you to give us who your expertise list is so that we can make that available to fire survivors.
So I wanted to piggyback on that and look for ways to leverage those funds.
Mhm.
So rather than helping individuals with taxes, find the 12 best experts
Mhm.
and have them run CLA classes for other attorneys and accountants.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you. Again, can we put that? There you go. Hannah's way ahead of me. These are all the kinds of ideas that we want you all to share with us at this point in the process. I mean, there's other things that have come up. I won't go through all of them, but people email us a lot. We listen. But frankly, maybe we don't always respond, but we're hearing it. I catalog it. We bring it to the committee. We have discussion. We have 3 fire survivors who are really leaders, like whether they're block captains or leading some of the organizations like Superior Rising, Marshall Together, who hear all of the things that are on the Slack and say, okay, here's what's bubbling up. Here's what we're hearing from community. And so it's a funnel of information. But this has all been at least we'd like to think that it's been a very kind of back and forth process. You're living the experience. You tell us what you're experiencing. We go, okay, heard. We're going to do something that we can either, we'll look to see what we can do, whether that's easing a process, adding availability for smoke and ash affected households, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, making the ALE available, those sorts of things. Okay. Yes, Hannah. There are some questions online.
Do we want to go to the next slide and show the application page and then go back to those, or do you want me to ask the questions from online?
Let's go to the next page, and then we're technically the Q&A section was at the total end, but that's okay. This is a conversation. So again, and what was your name? I'm sorry. Geraldine? Geraldine mentioned that there have been changes to the application form, changes to where things have been. this is your page. This is the website you should be referring to for all things, mostly all things funding available. Impact Development Fund. And again, this is like an innovation that we did here in Boulder for the Marshall Fire. State funds, county tax rebate, community foundation funds, they're all going through the same intermediary. Imagine if that wasn't there. I'm just saying this has never been done before. And so there is a one page where you can literally see every single program that's available. You can read through all the different guidelines. It's not perfect, but this is a vast improvement to what we've seen in other institutions or in other situations like this. And again, I hope we never have an experience like this again in our community, but we are so better prepared in the event that we do. So, yep. So let's scroll a little bit, Hannah. So that's the application form, right? And there's like a unified application form that can then tell you what are you available. This was my initial hope and dream from the get-go. It took us a little longer to get there. Keep scrolling. And then here are all the different programs, right? State of Colorado has a rebuild program. We have a rebuild program. Keep it going. They've got a mitigation program. We've got this is the housing support program. Thank you. Unmet needs is on there, right? The county use tax. So all the program guidelines are on there, and there's now just one application form for all of them. Again, that was my hope and dream from the get-go. It took a little longer to crowbar all of these different organizations into one application form, but we now see that this is a really important innovation for future situations like this. You can also schedule time with someone, so you're not kind of emailing or like calling into the void. You can actually book an appointment with the person, whether it's live or Zoom. Again, I know it's taken a minute to get here, and I apologize for that. But this is hopefully going to help in these kind of last bits of the marathon that everyone's in. Okay, so now we're going to Q&A, and we'll take some questions from the folks online. Great. Soon we will all be doing this because the weather's getting better.
Okay. So one question from online is the housing support hardship review an additional reason why fewer households have applied? Folks may feel that the hardship review is prohibitive.
Great. Okay, interesting. The hardship review, there's two components, right? So hardship review is financial or having people take a Fannie Mae course, and that course is available online. So is it too hard to sit through a Fannie Mae Zoom course about the pros and cons of not paying down your mortgage or other things? I don't know the answer to that, but I think perhaps the words hardship review are too harsh. It really is just like, do you have a financial need, which is the same as any other program. But if that's intimidating language, we can certainly look at softening it a bit.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
So the county is badgering me to pay debris removal, but due to being underinsured by 50% of the rebuild of a lesser house, we put everything towards the rebuild costs, including all of our personal property payout. Can the foundation pay the debris removal cost?
Michelle says no, strongly. Strongly said no. It's a duplication of benefits. That's what I was thinking too. Okay. Yep. Welcome to the feds, y'all, where the feds don't want two individuals paying for the same thing, even if the cost is bigger than any single one of our amounts. So that was a hard no from Michelle, and she knows the federal key components pieces.
Maybe just kind of
Reiterate
summarize what she said?
Yeah. So hi, Michelle. I'm not going to summarize what you said. I'm going to let you say it in your own words.
So the answer is no, and the reason is because it is a FEMA funded program, they do not allow duplicative assistance. So same or two different sources of funding for the same purpose. And so if FEMA is paying for debris and you also received insurance for debris and then, or you cannot then get community foundation support for debris to pay back your debris. I know that this all sounds absolutely asinine because it is. Long and short of it is if IDF pays the county as the county being the third party vendor, then it actually just widens the amount that is owed to the county because it widens the amount that the county owes back to FEMA.
So I guess if I can clarify that a little bit, Michelle, the duplication of benefits is not to the household, it's to the county. The county the county's on the hook. Yeah. Correct. Okay, so it basically comes down to the county is on the hook because they receive the FEMA funds to pay for the debris removal. If we give charitable funds on top of that at the individual household level, the county's on the hook for whatever we would have quote unquote paid for on behalf of the individual household level. Okay, then let's put that on the docket of suggestions for future funding, okay? Funny though, if people have feelings about us paying for debris removal, but okay, I'm listening, I'm listening. Yes, ma'am.
All right, and I think I have at least two more. So this one is about the smoke and ash eligibility.
Yes.
So can the 5-point smoke and ash eligibility criteria for the rebuild grant be reconsidered? The point system is not always a good match between how homes were impacted and required remediation to make the home safe to inhabit.
So let me first describe how let's pull up those guidelines. So, do you have the website up? So folks, again, we mentioned this earlier. We made a change to the rebuild fund grant requirements or program requirements December of 22 to include what we were calling catastrophic smoke and ash damage. So what does that mean? Because the rebuild fund is specifically for houses that were severely damaged or destroyed, we were looking at catastrophic smoke and ash damage that would include components of the home that needed to be replaced that would be pretty much the equivalent of gutting your home, right? So whether that's HVAC, drywall, and that's why I'm asking Hannah to pull the list up because I don't have it memorized, right? Flooring, cabinets, windows. I'm not even sure what encapsulation is, but I'm sure all of you do. The insulation, the roof, HVAC, et cetera, right? Like these are big ticket money things. And often the insurance company was like, oh, you have smoke and ash. Here's 20 grand. Best of luck to you, right? Any one of these things could have cost 20 grand. So the point system is such that it was intended for catastrophic smoke and ash. I will reiterate that through the Unmet Needs Fund, if a household had to do remediation that did not rise to the level of this catastrophic smoke and ash damage, we have provided some assistance, not a full reimbursement for all of the costs, but some assistance because we agree that it is important for these homes to be remediated to a level that ensures the health and well-being of our community. So, and I should say through the Unmet Needs Fund, the smoke and ash remediations capped at 10. I want to say 10. Don't quote us on that, but I think it's 10 grand. Because again, these are big ticket items. If you had to replace just your flooring and maybe got some money for insurance, we'll say, okay, well, maybe we'll cover up to 10 of whatever else wasn't covered by insurance. So we can certainly look at it. I would encourage that person to put their specific example into the feedback form. But again, we were hearing from kind of experts in housing and experts in remediation. That's how those got developed. Other questions online?
Yeah, this
Longer than we thought. Okay.
So due to time, this will probably be the last one from online. So how can we, fire victims and CFBC, put together a compendium of resources for the next communities that
Yes.
suffer wildfire devastation? I think we collectively have a lot to offer.
Totally agree. Thank you so much for that question, whoever asked that question online. We've been in early conversations with the county to kind of put together what our best practices have been, because again, we're getting asked. I have community foundations across the country calling me all the darn time. The county's like getting awards and doing all sorts of things for everything they've done. So we're starting to put that together. That said, the really important component to this, which has been the relationship between community and the institutions that are responsible and involved in the systems level work of this, couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot that we can do about how to make sure disaster recovery is a collective responsibility and a collective process. So if that person who asked that question has a suggestion on how we would do that, maybe we could pay for a facilitator to come in and we can break up into groups and folks can take their level of expertise, whether that was, you know, the community organizing that happened through Slack and how important and critical that was, or how to advocate with local, state, federal folks, or again, like I'll say this again, the data that we have from the DAC is so unique. No other community has that kind of data. I would have asked different questions. Knowing what we know now, we would have really taken a strong census of the community. But that initial data has informed a whole lot of the thinking, because we knew how many renters, we knew how many homeowners, we knew for the most part ish how many. We didn't know how many people in the household, but we had a sense. We knew who was insured, we knew who wasn't insured. But there's a lot of other questions we could have asked that I think would have been really helpful, just for all of us to be working off the same information. So I really appreciate that question. Folks, I did not realize we've been at this for almost 90 minutes, but I really appreciate you being patient and taking the time. I'll stick around in case anyone was shy and didn't want to have a question asked into the microphone. But thank you for joining us. Like we said, slides, video will be available online. And thank you again. For those of you who are getting into your homes, congrats. And thank you.